The Woman in the Shadows. The rain fell like a curtain over New York City. It was one of those gray mornings when the city seemed to hold its breath. Taxis honked in slow, tired bursts. People scurried along sidewalks with umbrellas tilted at impossible angles. But in the middle of this wet ballet, one figure walked slowly, unbothered by the rain. Her name was Claire Bennett, and at first glance, she was forgettable. She wore a long black coat, not stylish, practical. Her hair was pinned back in a way that suggested habit more than fashion. She didn't carry a sleek violin case or wear flashy jewelry like the other musicians heading into the Hamilton Music Hall that morning. She carried only a small leather-bound book under one arm. Inside were pages worn from years of flipping, musical scores written in her own hand. She wasn't here to perform. She wasn't here to impress. She was only here to observe. At least, that's what she believed. Inside the hall, excitement buzzed in the air. Students in their 20s, dressed in sleek performance outfits, filled the lobby. Some tuned their instruments in corners. Others gossiped and compared nerves. They were all gathered for one reason: the masterclass. It was a once-a-year event hosted by Eleanor March, the legendary conductor and violinist known for her brutal honesty and impossible standards. "Did you hear what she said about the Paris finalist last year?" Someone whispered near the front desk. "She called his vibrato an insult to the instrument and told him to go sell insurance instead." Claire smiled faintly. She'd heard of Eleanor March, of course. Who hadn't? But Claire wasn't here for that. Her invitation was extended by a quiet benefactor, Mr. Patel, her old music publisher, who had once said to her, "Claire, your music is brilliant, but you write like someone who's never bled for a performance. You need to feel again. Go, just watch." And so she had come. She walked quietly to the reception desk. The young woman barely glanced at her. "Name: Claire Bennett. I'm here to observe the March Masterclass. Are you a donor?" Claire shook her head. "No, I'm a composer." "Ah," the girl replied slowly, looking her over. "Well, I don't think observers are encouraged, but you're on the list. Room 101. Don't be late." Claire accepted the visitor badge with a quiet thank you. The girl didn't respond. Room 101 was more of a small theater than a classroom. Tiered seating wrapped around a wooden stage. Spotlights hung overhead, though dim for now. A sleek grand piano sat in the corner, but all eyes were on the center of the room. A single music stand, a chair, and a small black stool beside it. Claire slid into a seat near the back. She tried to disappear into the shadows. She opened her notebook and began quietly jotting things down. She wasn't sure what she hoped to learn, just that something inside her told her she needed to be here. More students trickled in. Some she recognized from music journals. Young prodigies, scholarship winners, names that were already making headlines. Claire. She hadn't touched a violin in over 9 years. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the side door opened and a hush fell over the room. Eleanor March entered like a storm in heels. She was tall, silver-haired, with a spine as straight as her reputation. She wore all black, except for a crimson scarf knotted neatly around her throat. No one dared to speak. "Good morning," she said, her voice low but commanding. "Some of you know who I am. Some of you think you do. What matters is this. You are here to learn something real. Not technique, not theory, not what YouTube or conservatories spoon-feed you. You're here to find out whether you deserve to hold that instrument in your hands." A few students shifted uncomfortably. "I do not coddle. I do not flatter. I tell the truth. If you can't handle that, leave." No one moved. "Good," she said, then consulted her clipboard. "Let's begin." The first few students performed short solo pieces. All of them were technically sound, every note perfect. But Eleanor's responses were cold and surgical. To play without feeling is to lie with your fingers. You think playing fast is the same as playing well. You're performing for applause, not from the heart. That's why it sounds empty." Each critique cut deeper than the last. Claire scribbled furiously in her notebook. Her heart ached at every performance, not from pity, but from recognition. She had once been that young, that driven, that eager for approval. But her story had gone differently. At the end of the third performance, Eleanor scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Claire. "You," she said, voice echoing through the theater. Claire's heart stopped. The students all turned to look. Claire didn't move. "Yes, you. In the back. With the notebook. You haven't played." "I'm not a student," Claire said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't ask if you were. I said you haven't played. I'm only here to observe." "There are no observers in music," Eleanor said. "Only cowards and creators. Which are you?" Claire felt the heat rise in her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but couldn't find words. "I assume you play." Claire hesitated. "I used to." A smirk touched Eleanor's lips. "Wonderful. Another used to. Would you honor us by showing what that means?" Laughter rippled through the room. Not cruel, but dismissive. Most hadn't even noticed Claire until now. Eleanor gestured toward the stage. "Come. Or leave. But don't waste a seat in this room with silence." Claire's fingers gripped her notebook like a lifeline. She wanted to say no. She wanted to walk out. But something inside her snapped. She stood. Every step toward the stage felt like walking into a storm she wasn't prepared for. Eleanor handed her a violin from the display beside the stool. "It's tuned." Claire took it gently. The weight of it made her knees weak. She hadn't held one since the incident at Avery Hall, when her hands shook so badly during a live performance that she dropped the bow. After that, she had buried the instrument in a storage unit and never looked back. But now it was here again, in her hands, waiting. "What will you play?" Eleanor asked. Claire looked at the music stand. Empty. "I don't need a sheet," she replied, surprising even herself. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Then impress us." Claire took a deep breath. The violin nestled under her chin like an old friend that still remembered her, even if she had tried to forget it. Her bow hovered over the strings. She could have played something simple, something short, just enough to escape the spotlight without total humiliation. But then, she thought of all those years of silence, all those nights composing in the dark while the sound of her violin haunted her dreams. And she thought, no more hiding. She began to play. Not with fear. Not for them. For herself. The opening melody of a long-forgotten Hungarian folk piece flowed from the strings. It was a composition she'd once written but never published. A deeply personal piece. Something intimate. Raw. The students sat up. The room changed. Her bow danced with sudden confidence. Her fingers moved with precision. Not cold, not mechanical, but rich with color and emotion. She closed her eyes and leaned into the music. The sound rose and fell like a story being told for the first time. It was not perfect, but it was alive. And everyone in that room felt it. Even Eleanor. When she finished, the last note hung in the air like a whisper. No one clapped. No one moved. They were too stunned. Claire opened her eyes. Her breathing was uneven. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. Eleanor said nothing. For a moment, the woman who had sliced every performance into ribbons looked, silenced. Then, finally, she spoke. "Who are you?" Claire looked out at the sea of stunned faces. "I'm just someone who used to play." The spotlight returns. Silence is a strange kind of applause. That's what Claire told herself as she stepped off the stage, the violin still warm in her hands. No one said a word. Not the students, not the professors, not even Eleanor March. It wasn't rejection. It was shock. A moment where music did what it always promised, but rarely delivered. It stopped time. Claire sat back down in the last row. her face pale but her spirit buzzing. Her hands were still trembling, but it wasn't like before. This was different. This was adrenaline, not anxiety. She had done it. She had played again. Not for fame, not for a crowd, but for the part of her that had been silenced for nearly a decade. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. The break was announced a few minutes later. The audience slowly rose, like they had just awakened from a dream. Conversations began in low tones. The rustle of papers. The soft shuffle of violin cases being packed or reopened. But Claire couldn't move. She was still clutching the borrowed violin when she felt a presence beside her. Claire Bennett, the voice said, sharp but curious. She looked up. Eleanor March. I've been in this industry for 40 years. The woman said, arms crossed. And I don't often forget names. Yet yours doesn't ring any bells. Claire swallowed. I stopped playing years ago. That much is obvious, Eleanor said, but there was no venom in her tone. But your performance, it wasn't the playing of someone who forgot. Claire gently returned the violin to its case. It was never my fingers that failed me. It was my fear. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. And what changed today? I got tired of being afraid. The words felt like a confession, or maybe a declaration. Eleanor's expression shifted slightly, less judge, more peer. I don't offer compliments lightly, Miss Bennett, she said, but you gave something rare today. Not perfection, but honesty. It's what every performer is missing. Claire didn't respond. I want you back on that stage this afternoon, Eleanor said plainly. For the second session. But this time, not as a surprise. I want them to know exactly who you are. Claire blinked. I'm not part of this class. You are now. News spreads fast in a world built on reputation. By the time the afternoon session began, the theater buzzed with rumors. Whispers filled every corner of the room. Did you hear about the woman from the morning? She wasn't even supposed to perform. She's not a student. She's a composer. Some say she studied under Nathan Riley at Oxford. Someone recorded it. It's already online. Over 40,000 views in 4 hours. Claire sat backstage, heart pounding in her chest, like a war drum. She didn't want this kind of attention. Not like this. And yet, part of her felt alive. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. A message from her publisher, Mr. Patel. Just saw the clip. You finally played your truth. We need to talk, soon. She slipped the phone back in and exhaled slowly. Out front, Eleanor stood before the room, clipboard in hand. Before we begin our second round, she announced, I've invited someone back to the stage. She's not a student, not a regular performer, but she reminded all of us this morning why music exists in the first place. She turned toward the side curtain. Claire Bennett, the floor is yours. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Claire stepped out. No hiding this time. No cardigan. She wore a simple black blouse, hair tied up neatly, her step steady. She held the same violin, now feeling like an extension of her arm. No one laughed now. No one dismissed her. They leaned forward in their seats. This time, Claire chose something new. Not a famous piece. Not Bach. Not Tchaikovsky. But her own composition. A piece she had written in isolation, never meant to be performed in public. It was titled First Light. Inspired by the first day she stopped crying after her breakdown. The day she looked at the sunrise and felt something other than pain. The first note was soft, tentative, like the opening of a door. Then a second, warmer tone, like sunlight slipping through curtains. The melody built, gently weaving between melancholy and hope. She played like she was telling her own story, but without words. In the third row, a student wept openly. She wasn't sure why. In the back, one of the professors stopped taking notes. The piece lasted just under 5 minutes. But when it ended, this time, there was no silence. The room erupted in applause. Thunderous, unreserved, not just polite. Real. Eleanor smiled, a rare and genuine expression. Claire offered a small bow. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her chest was full of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. After the session, the floodgates opened. Students approached her. Professors offered handshakes. Even the dean of the school asked her to lunch. But the person Claire noticed most was standing quietly off to the side. A girl in her early 20s. Shy. Red scarf. Pale skin. She held a violin case but hadn't played once that day. Claire walked over. "You didn't perform," she said gently. The girl nodded. "I wanted to, but I get too nervous." Claire smiled. "I know exactly what that feels like." The girl blinked. "Really? But you were amazing." Claire shook her head. "I froze during a concert once. Live TV. National audience. Dropped my bow in the middle of the second movement. I disappeared after that." The girl looked stunned. "So what changed?" Claire took a breath, looking out the theater window at the setting sun. "Someone dared me to stop being afraid. So I did." She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Don't wait 10 years. Play. Even if your voice shakes." That night, Claire returned home to her small apartment in Brooklyn. The elevator creaked like it always did. Her cat, Leopold, meowed at the door, demanding food like a furry tyrant. She fed him, took off her coat, sat at her writing desk, and for the first time in 9 years, she opened her dusty violin case and placed the instrument carefully beside her blank music sheet. She didn't compose that night. She just held the violin and listened. But that was only the beginning. The next day, she received 3 emails. A music agent from Chicago requesting a meeting. A video link, her performance, now at 250,000 views. An official invitation to perform as guest soloist for the New York Winter Gala. In 2 months, her hands trembled again. But this time, she smiled, because she wasn't afraid anymore. A stage reclaimed. 2 months later, the world had changed around Claire Bennett. She had never chased the spotlight, but somehow the spotlight had found her anyway, and refused to let go. Her name appeared in music blogs. A viral video of her masterclass performance had reached over 1.2 million views. Comments flooded in daily. "I don't even like classical music, but this made me cry. She doesn't just play the violin. She speaks through it. Where can I hear more from this woman?" Concert invitations followed. A music streaming platform wanted to feature her original compositions. A producer from Los Angeles requested a scoring sample for a historical drama series. And now, she stood at the Lincoln Center, facing the velvet curtain that would rise in less than 3 minutes. Claire took a slow breath, the familiar weight of her violin in her hand, the soft glow of the backstage lighting on her shoulder, her reflection in the black lacquer of the floorboards. This was real. No longer the forgotten composer tucked away in her Brooklyn apartment. Tonight, she was the featured soloist. But despite the glamour of the gala, the red carpet, the champagne, the high society crowd, Claire didn't feel different. She still wore simple black, still carried her leather-bound notebook everywhere, and still felt the flutter of nerves. But it was no longer fear. It was readiness. 2 minutes, a stagehand whispered. Claire nodded. She stepped closer to the curtain. Behind it waited an orchestra of elite musicians, a conductor who had requested her by name. An audience filled with patrons, musicians, critics, and celebrities. And somewhere out there, in the second row, Eleanor March. Claire's mind drifted back to that masterclass. That moment Eleanor had called her out, expecting to humiliate her in front of a sea of smirking students. But instead of crumbling, Claire had risen. And now, she would rise again. Not for revenge, but for redemption. The curtain lifted. A soft spotlight found her instantly. The audience was still, hushed with anticipation. Even in the dark, She saw faces leaning forward. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra took its cue. And then, Claire stepped forward alone, her violin cradled like a secret, and she began to play. Emergence, her own piece, composed in the quiet days following the masterclass, a story in sound of hiding, breaking, and becoming. It started with a single note, pure and trembling, like a voice unsure if it should speak. Then came the second, bolder, searching. A phrase emerged, then a sentence, then a story. The orchestra entered softly behind her, like memories returning, gentle, supportive, never overshadowing. The music swelled, the tempo quickened, like someone running, not away, but towards something long denied. Each section of the piece reflected her journey, the lost years, the silence, the moment of confrontation, and finally, the return. Claire's bow moved with confident grace. Her fingers danced, no longer shackled by self-doubt. The music poured from her, not as performance, but as truth. And the audience could feel it. In the third movement, a swelling crescendo brought the entire orchestra alive behind her. It was fire and freedom and clarity all at once. By the final note, she was breathless. The hall was breathless. And then, silence. A different kind of silence. A sacred pause, like the world holding its breath before remembering how to speak. Then it began. One person clapped, then another. Then the wave rose, until the entire Lincoln Center erupted in thunderous, unrelenting applause. People stood. Cheers echoed off marble walls. A critic wiped his eyes. Even musicians on stage were clapping. For her. Claire took a breath, not shaking, not panicked, just full of the moment, full of her truth. After the final bows and curtain calls, Claire stepped backstage. She didn't expect anyone to follow her. She needed quiet. She needed air. But she found someone already waiting there. Eleanor March. This time, no clipboard, no scarf, no armor. Just a woman with steel in her eyes and softness in her voice. You rewrote the room, Eleanor said quietly. And possibly, the rules. Claire smiled faintly. I didn't mean to. I just told my story. It's the most honest thing I've heard in years, Eleanor said. You reminded this world that music isn't about pleasing perfectionists. It's about being brave. Claire looked down. I used to think I was broken because I couldn't perform, because I let fear win. Eleanor's voice softened. But you didn't. You took the long way back, but you made it. And now the world's better for it. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Eleanor reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. She handed it to Claire. What's this? Claire asked. The National Conservatory, Eleanor said. They're creating a new mentorship program. They need someone who understands both sides of music, the shadows and the spotlight. Someone who can help young talent find their voice and their courage. Claire stared at the envelope. You're offering me a teaching position. I'm offering you a chance to pass the light forward, Eleanor replied, and maybe change some lives the way you changed mine. Claire smiled. She didn't need to open the envelope. She already knew her answer. Weeks passed. Claire continued composing, performing, and now, teaching. She met students who reminded her of her younger self. A boy who hid behind his cello, afraid to make mistakes. A girl who played flawlessly but said, I don't feel anything when I perform. A nonverbal teen who found her voice only when holding a violin. Claire didn't teach them scales first. She taught them how to feel safe with their own sound. She told them, technique matters, but truth matters more. She gave them permission to fail and permission to rise. One rainy afternoon, as Claire packed up from class, a young student approached her. She was small, maybe 11, big brown eyes, nervous hands. Miss Bennett, she said softly. Yes, I saw your video, the one where you played at the masterclass. My mom showed it to me when I said I was too scared to try out for orchestra. Claire smiled. And did you try out? The girl nodded. I did, and I got in. On second chair. Claire's eyes shimmered. Good, she whispered. Never be afraid to be heard. That night, Claire walked home through the soft mist of spring rain. She passed a street musician playing under a flickering lamp. A young man, shivering slightly, playing a quiet, haunting melody. She paused, listened, dropped a bill into his case. He looked up. Thanks. Claire smiled and handed him something else, her old leather-bound notebook. Here, she said, fill this with your music. It's got some stories in it already, but it's ready for yours. The young man blinked. Are you that violinist from? Claire winked. I used to be someone who hid. Now, I help people shine.